Today I'm going to be inserting the pins into the handles, and that's going to allow me to finish assembling the turning saw. And of course, once it's all assembled, I'll be doing a few test cuts to find out whether all this work has given me a usable tool or just something that looks good on the shop wall. One thing that I know that I'm definitely going to be changing about the saw are the handles. They're not too small, but I think a larger handle would make the saw a lot easier to use and a lot more comfortable to use over a longer period of time. So I'm going to be swapping those out at some point. So for today, I'm just going to take kind of a shortcut to get these handles assembled so I can get the saw put together and get it working so I can see how I like it and then decide which direction I want to go. So in the last heat, I folded over the end of the bar to make it larger, and now I'm just driving that into the handle, and the end is red hot, so it's just going to burn itself into the handle and create a seat there. From a purely functional point of view, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it this way, of course. It just looks terrible. But again, I'm not too concerned about that because I'm definitely going to be replacing these handles, and I just want to get this saw assembled so I can use it because I don't even know if the whole thing is a piece of junk or not yet. So I have to figure that out, and then from there I can relax and design a better solution to this problem. So here's how I'm leaving it for now. The pin is locked into position, and the large flat area at the end will keep it from spinning around in the handle while I'm using the saw. These are the blades that I'm using. They're basically just large coping saw blades, and they're sold as bow saw blades. And I bought them from Lee Valley Tools, so I'm hoping that it's a standard item that's going to be readily available. And as you can see, they're pinned just like a regular coping saw blade, and it's a fairly aggressive blade. It's 10 teeth per inch, so I'm hoping it'll cut fairly well. The next part of the process is to figure out where the notches go on the pins that are going to hold the blade. This is a really tricky part of the process because the way it works is you need to pre-tension the frame of the saw and then insert the blade, and then when you release the bar clamp, this frame tensions up and applies pressure to the saw blade. So you need to mark the location of the pins when the saw frame is just under the slightest bit of tension. And then once you have the blade inserted, you can evaluate whether you need to increase the tension on the saw or take some of the tension away. If you have too much tension, that'll be very obvious because it'll shear the pins right out of the blade. If you don't have enough tension, then the blade won't stay taut and it'll tend to wander in the cut. You increase the tension by spreading apart the arms that are holding the handles, and you decrease the tension by bringing them closer together. Always start with a measurement and then add a certain amount and then evaluate how that's going. Then you have something as a reference that you can say, okay, well, I need to cut that in half, and then work from there. You're more than likely going to shear a few pins before you get the tension right, but they can easily be replaced by just inserting short bits of sewing needle into the holes. The loose pins on the saw are a little bit more awkward to deal with than the original pins, but once the whole frame is assembled and the saw is under tension, nothing's moving anyway. I'm going to be using my cutoff saw to saw in the grooves for the blade. The mark on the pin is for the location of the pins on the saw blade, so I need to saw past that by a short amount so that the blade can fit in there easily. The vice grips are holding a zero clearance insert that I made by just sawing through a short piece of plate. Now I can push the pin right through the center of the blade and it's not going to fall through the crack in the table. Here I'm just using a hacksaw to saw the notch that's going to hold the pins for the saw. The cut needs to be angled so the pins are always held tight to the bottom of the notch. When I tested the blade and the handle, the pins on the saw did not fit into the notches that I sawed out, so I need to widen that notch slightly. So that's easily done with a hacksaw if you set it up the way I have here. I'm looking straight down on the vise here, and you can see the handle in the vise, and sitting right next to it is a heavy plate. And I have that plate set up so the top edge is level with the top of the pin. Now, this is another one of those examples that isn't going to look too great because I have to be where you are to be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm just kind of guessing at where this saw cut has to go right now. But basically, I just want you to get the idea of how to approach this so that you can do this cut. I need to start the saw cut just basically half the width of the saw over from the original cut. So to do that, I'm going to start sawing the back plate. And then once I have that saw cut established, I'm going to be able to saw down the side of the cut that I've already made in the pin, and it's just going to mill away the excess that I don't want. The saw cut in the back plate is going to keep the saw on track because it can't go anywhere. And you can use this technique to saw any size of a notch that you want. You just keep moving the back plate over so that you're making a fresh saw cut anytime you need to make a cut that's half lapped into an existing saw cut. So now the moment of truth. I have the frame tensioned up so that the pins will fit into the end of the notches, and I have the handles turned so the notches are facing up. That way the blade just sits in there and the saw blade just naturally falls into place when I release the tension on the frame. Everybody has their own way of using these saws, but I tend to use them on the pull strokes. So here the saw teeth are pointing towards the lower handle. And I usually work on a high bench. Here I just have a 2x8 clamped into a vise to get fairly close to the right position. Of course, if you have a wider surface, it'll make it a lot easier to hang on to the board. Here it's rocking around quite a bit. And if I had it slightly higher, it would make it easier to use the full length of the saw blade. But all in all, I'm quite happy with how this is working. If I had a better setup with a hold down tool that would keep the board very rigid, this saw would pretty much fly through this board. These saws always tend to have their own kind of balance as well, and you learn to figure out how much pressure you need to apply to get the perfect cut. So there's a bit of a learning curve every time you set up a new one of these saws. So I think with a little bit of fine tuning and a little bit of practice, this is going to work great. Hi, I'm Dennis and thanks for watching. As most of you know, for the past few years I've been producing YouTube videos on a part-time basis. I am now looking to turn that hobby into a full-time job, and for that I really need your help. A small monthly contribution from a really small number of viewers will generate the income that I need to achieve that goal. So if you're interested in the work that I'm doing and you want to lend your support, please click on the Patreon icon at the bottom of the screen. Thank you. We'll see you next time.